Okay, so we're going to talk about Jijimuge today. So what that is I will explain because that's what we're talking about, right? So it's a Japanese word, Jijimuge. Ji means like things and objects and entities, and mu and ge sort of means no barrier or without a barrier. And so it basically means all things, no barriers between those things. So I think we're quite used to the way that we go around is labeling things and describing things and compartmentalizing things into individual descriptions. And so the concept of Jijimuge is to be aware that that isn't necessarily always the case. So for example, if we take my hand, I can say this is my hand because that is what it is labeled as. But my hand is part of my arm, right? Which is another thing that we've labeled. And I can't move my hand without moving my arm. So even though we would describe them as separate things, they're not separate things, and I can't do one without the other. And you can begin to see where a lot of our emotional suffering can come from. Imagine if I tried to move my hand without moving my arm. Imagine if I didn't know that. So I tried to in my daily life go around my daily life moving my hand without moving my arm, and it doesn't work like that. If you move your fingers, you have muscles in your arm moving, and so that's part of what I'm trying to get to, right? So for example, suppose we see a pianist playing the piano, and I would say, where does the music come from? Does it come from the piano? Well, it doesn't, because the pianist is playing the piano. So does it come from the pianist? Well, no, because it's coming from the piano. So I would say, now tell me, where does the pianist end and the piano begin? So it would be too easy to say, here's the piano, here's the pianist, right? That would just be compartmentalizing them. But in the midst of a piano concerto, the music just comes out of it. There's no barrier or no division between one or the other. So given that, I like to pose myself a little challenge and try to take a situation and bend it out of the linguistic traps that we set for ourselves, I suppose. So, for example, if I take the statement, I draw with the pencil. Okay, that is true. I draw with the pencil. But if I take the statement, the pencil draws with me, that is also equally true. But we wouldn't normally say it like that. We'd normally say, I draw with the pencil. But it's also as equally as true that the pencil draws with me. In the same way that the pianist and the piano is the same as the pencil and the artist, right? So I feel that knowing this ability to twist the linguistics back on itself, we can work our way through any given potentially stressful situation because the concept of the pencil is separate from me, but that isn't necessarily true. When you're drawing, you're in the act of it, and it's really become the same as the hand and the arm. I move my hand, I move my arm, I move myself, I move the pencil. They are connected, even though I can pull the pencil away from myself and throw it away. In that position, there are no barriers between it. And it would kind of be foolish to think that the pencil was always separate and the pianist was always separate from the piano, and therefore the same continuing on for most of the things that we see. So let's take the flowers and the bees, for example, okay? If we take away the flowers, then there won't be any bees, because the bees need the flowers, right? And if we take away the bees, then there won't be any flowers, because the flowers need the bees to pollinate. Now, we could cheat and say, well, the flowers might find other pollinators, right? But that isn't actually true. That isn't how it works, because in reality, and secretly, the flowers and the bees are the same organism, right? They just appear as separate entities because of how we have labeled them as such, because of how we view the world from our construct, right? But in reality, they are not separate. They are one continuous organism that deals with itself continuously in the same way that my hand and my arm are one continuous organism. Even though a bee can fly away from a flower, that's just because of how we see things in dimensional space. It doesn't actually relate to how it is, you know?
So yeah, they don't appear attached, but that's entirely due to our system of words and descriptions. And anyway, even attached is probably the wrong word. This is why we're saying no barrier. If you take away the bees, the flowers will die. If you take away the flowers, the bees will die. If you take away the flowers, the sun will die. Because if you take away the sun, the flowers will die, right? So, in the same way, you can touch the sun without burning yourself. If you touch a piece of paper, you are touching part of the sun because the sun has shone on the tree has been cut down, the tree has been turned into paper. You're able to touch that because it is all that. And I know that sounds silly, but like I say, that is the trouble that we get ourselves into for compartmentalizing ourselves. And to be perfectly honest, it's actually nicer to go around knowing that you can, whatever, hold on to the sun in a piece of origami paper or something than it is having to scientifically lock everything away into these individual boxes that follow these individual rules that aren't necessarily kind. Sometimes people aren't very nice, let's just say that. And if you could just understand the concept of no barrier between, then you could do some very amazing things without necessarily trying to do anything because the music just comes out of the piano like that, doesn't it? So yeah, and one of my favorite books is Dandelion Wine by Ray Bradbury. And it's probably my favorite book, but there's a scene in there where the main character, the boy, 12-year-old boy, gets up in the morning, runs downstairs, gets told off for not washing behind his ears, goes back upstairs, runs back down again, and then bolts down eating his breakfast really fast, and then runs up and climbs a tree, because that's what he wants to do in the morning, wants to climb the tree. It turns out it's a sad day because great-grandma is dying that day, and they all have to go and visit great-grandma. And he goes up to great-grandma and he says, "But great-grandma, you're always here. You're so ancient. You've been here my whole life. You can't not be here. That's ridiculous." And she says to him, Oh, don't you worry," she says. "I'm going to be getting up tomorrow and I'm going to run downstairs and I'm going to get told off for not washing behind my ears and I'm going to bolt down my breakfast and I'm going to run up and climb the tree." So yeah. So there we go. That's my little chat of that. So I hope you like that. Let me know what you think. And yeah, there we go. I don't really know how to end that now, but I suppose it's never gonna have an end, is it? If you think about it. So yeah, okay, bye-bye.